The haunting. I had a feeling that I was going crazy, but I was not sure. I laid in the 5-bedroom family house in Manchester and tried to sleep, but the woo-woo of the weeping willow trees sounded eerie. So I had to convince myself that I was not afraid. "You're going to regret the day you get that house," I heard Aunt Edith's voice whisper in the wind. Talk about fulfillment. I should probably pack up and go back to St. James. But the novelty of owning a house and land was still in my bones, so I stayed. I had no idea that my grandfather would have left the family house and the 3 acres of land that surrounded it to me. He gave everybody else, his 5 surviving children and numerous grandchildren, a big plot and told them to sort it out. But to me, he gave the house and land. I'm beginning to regret his decision. The smiles and the welcome that I received when I came back to Knockpatrick in Manchester were wearing thin. The family started to treat me as an enemy after the will was read. Aunt Edith, Grandpa's oldest child, was the most vocal with her disagreement. "How him forgive you 3 acres of land?" she would ask me incredulously. "You live in Mobay for 10 years now and we hardly hear from you." She would shake her head and bitterly pronounce, "The house haunted, you know. Even Dada," she referred to her father, "had to move out." "But Aunt Edith, he went to a nursing home." "Is so you feel? He moved out because he hear voices." "He was probably becoming senile," I rebutted. "If you think so," she said slyly, "we could probably tell the lawyers them that him was senile. That's why him leave the house to you." That was water under the bridge. They had already contested the will and lost, so I did not reply to her taunt. She would harumph and mutter, "Him probably didn't mad long before we know." I realized that the issue of the house and the land was becoming a big deal for the family, so I tried to stay away from them. However, well-meaning cousins and other relatives would show up at the house in the days and reminisce about how haunted the house was, and how they doubted that a young lady such as myself could live there alone. The only cousin I trusted was Peter. He would keep my company but left when it got late. "Carlene, are you sure you don't want company?" "I am sure, Pete." "All right, but if anything happens or you see anything, just remember to call me upon my cellular, all right?" I nodded, warmed by his concern. But tonight, the howling of the willow tree sounded closer, giving me goose pimples on my arms. "Carlene!" I heard a whisper outside the window. "Carlene!" I crouched even lower under the sheets. I was trembling like a leaf. "Carlene, girl, I'm coming for you." I could not think. I could not move my head. It felt twice its normal size. I thought haunted houses were a thing of the past. The whispering stopped just as suddenly as it began, but I could not sleep. I am sure I was wide awake and not dreaming when I heard the low calling of my name. I did not move for the rest of the night. I was scared out of my wits, and the night passed interminably. As soon as I heard the crowing of the rooster, I got up, my body stiff from the inert position that I was in. I grabbed my cellular and called Pete. He did not answer his telephone, leaving me to suffer alone. I had family members living all around me, but I was afraid that if I told them what happened, they would say I told you so. The house was a huge, old-style Georgian design with a wraparound porch made mostly of wood. The little creaks and groans that the floorboards made as I walked toward the veranda had more than the usual significance this morning. I laughed softly to myself as I thought of my stupidity. In the light of day, everything was so much brighter and fresh. Life was good. Why waste it on a vague nighttime memory? The air was nippy and had the unsullied feel of a rural dawn. I huddled under a thick sweater that once belonged to my grandmother and held a cup of fever grass tea in both hands to keep me warm as I watched the morning dawn. I saw Aunt Mavis tramp up the walkway, her back hunched under the strain of a black crocus bag she was carrying on her head. "Morning, girl," she said, smiling and baring her gums. Good morning, Aunt Mavis. How are you? Could be better. Me hear say Lucy Duppy was walking last night. She not come over here. Lucy? Who is Lucy? My blood ran cold, and I felt as if a vice was tightening on my head. It was as if the life is good speech to myself was swept under the rug of fright. Lucy was Dada's youngest sister, but she used to talk how the house and land should belong to the family and not one person. But Dada get it from his parents, and now you get it from him. You know what me can't understand? I shook my head. Why Dada never give one of him own pitney the land? Even your father, him own a son. Why him give a grand pitney, one him hardly know? Well, I gave the usual answer. Dada said that you were all fighting over the land and he wanted to give someone that was not involved. What you alone doing in a 5-bedroom house? You can manage it? Yes, Aunt Mavis. Well, beware. Last time Lucy Duppy roamed, trouble boil. I nodded mutely and she took off downhill with the banana on her head and a machete swinging in her hand. I was now having even more doubts about coming back to live in Manchester. My mother and father were in St. James. They too had warned me not to come and live here. But I wanted the country life. Furthermore, at the age of 21, it was quite an accomplishment to have my own house. The night came all too soon. It was a hectic day filled with tidying up the various rooms in the house. I wanted to search for a job in Mandeville, but I realized that I would have to attack the tidying up project first so that I could feel settled. I turned on all the lights and went into the room I slept in. I took a deep breath and went deep under the sheets. It was not long before I fell asleep. Carlene, was the whispered voice that woke me up. I looked from under the sheet, sure that I was dreaming. Carlene, I heard again. This time the house was well lit and I felt a bit more confident. The voice was strange and feminine. Carlene, came the whisper again. I trembled and listened. Go back where you're coming from, Carlene. I then heard a high-pitched scream and a thud like a drum. I jumped up trembling in fear. Cold sweat was streaming in rivulets down my face. I did not hear the voice again that night. But once again I was gripped with fear and awaiting the arrival of dawn with anticipation. In the day, I jumped at everything. The floorboards, the bark of a dog, the sound of the willow tree had me trembling like a leaf. Peter was conspicuously absent, and I had no one to talk to but my parents, who urged me to come home. The next night, I was trembling before I even got in bed. I sat wide-eyed in the bed, unable to sleep. In the wee hours, approximately 1 o'clock, I heard the thump, thump, thump sound of a drum. When I could not take it any longer, I decided to face my fears and see what was going on outside, so I peeped through my window. What I saw drove fear in me. There were people dressed in white floating around on the front lawn. Carlene, go home, they whispered and danced. They seemed almost transparent. Then, wonder of wonders, they disappeared, and once again it was pitch black like only rural Jamaica can get. I went under my bed in a cocoon of sheets. I had nowhere else to go. The least croaking that the old house made was torture to my ears. I felt as if I was on the verge of a serious breakdown. That is how Peter found me, I think. I do not remember the morning after very clearly, but I remember him dragging me from under the bed. My body felt stiff, cold, and old. What is the matter with you? He asked, concerned. You did not return my phone calls, I whispered brokenly. I left to go to Kingston on business and left the phone, he said, staring at me strangely. Why were you under the bed? I was about to call the police. I thought that they killed you. Who? I asked. I felt as if my tongue was heavy and that his voice was coming from a distance. The family, he said sardonically. These people would do anything for a piece of land. I am going to stay here tonight, he said. I felt heavy. I could not lift my body, and the day sailed by with me staring at the ceiling. If you do not get better, I'm carrying you to a doctor, Peter said, standing over me, after unsuccessfully trying to get me to eat. I watched through my window as the shadows of evening descended on the house. I dozed off, not being able to keep my eyes opened any longer. When I woke up, it was the dead of night. I felt vaguely uncomfortable. When I looked up through the window, it was opened wider than I had left it, and eyes were staring at me, evil eyes. I screamed and screamed until my throat was raw. Peter came rushing to my bedroom. He turned on the light and looked at my prostrate body on the bed. He later told me that I was babbling like an idiot. I had no sense of self at that time. He looked around the house and then came back and hugged me to him. "Carlene," he whispered, "the house is not haunted." "Of course it is. I'm leaving tomorrow," I trembled. "No, the family are trying to scare you. I recognized Aunt Edith's silhouette running down the hill." "Why would they do this? I've done them no wrong." "Well, we'll fix them," Peter mumbled and scratched his beard. "How? Please tell me how," I eagerly asked. "We're going to scare them. We're going to give them a dose of their own medicine. We will plan it tomorrow. Get some sleep. The only duppy around here is the one they will see tomorrow night." I slept peacefully, taking comfort from Peter's presence in the next room. In the morning, Peter and I discussed the haunting around the dining room table. "You said there were many of them dancing and then they disappeared?" he asked, disbelievingly shaking his head. I murmured. "Well, it must be the cousins Jiggs and Mitzi. They are in a dancing group at school. They must have shone flashlights on the white clothes and this must have given the iridescent effect." I stared at him in wonder. "Don't they sleep at night, Peter? Why would they leave their warm beds to come to this cold place in the middle of the night?" "Greed," he theorized, scratching his head. "This house is said to have money buried in some rooms. They could not find Grandma's money after she died. Served them right, she hid it." "What about the voice calling in the night? Who could that be?" "The voice calling in the night could belong to anybody. It seems as if they're all in this together. If I were here, I would probably have gotten wind of the plans. Anyway, here's what we'll do." We planned all day, and for the first time since moving into the house, I anticipated the night. Peter and I dressed all in black and hovered in the banana grove near my bedroom window. The night was chilly, and I was happy for the thick black sweater that I had on. I turned the nightlight to see my watch. It was 12:30, about the time of the hauntings. "Switch that off," Peter whispered close to my ear and put his hand over my watch face. "Where are the radio and the sheets?" It was in the duffel bag at my feet. I realized that in the dark he could not see. "Duffel bag," I whispered. He seemed to hear because he settled at the root of the tree. He pulled on the white skull mask that we were both supposed to wear and put his finger over his fearful-looking lips. I began to grow impatient. No one was coming, and I began to think that probably there was really a duppy, and here we were in the thick darkness ripe for a scare. Just when I was about to panic, we heard whisperings near my bedroom window. I could faintly make out the shape of two bodies. One was Aunt Edith and the other was Cousin Murphy, who would usually just stare at me mutely. I hurriedly donned my facial mask and crouched beside Peter. "Go on round the front, go dance," I heard Aunt Edith whisper to someone. "Murphy, where the drum there?" "Right here, so," Murphy mumbled. "Kitara?" I heard my aunt call softly to my cousin, who was always coming over to the house and trying on my dresses. "Go closer to the room window so that this time when she look out, una eye can make four. Me hear say she coulda hardly talk the last time we scare her. This time I want them to come take her out pon stretcher. Mad house where I put her." I shuddered at the venom that I heard in her voice. Peter, who was also listening intently, was silently laughing beside me. I could feel his body going into convulsions. "All right, everybody ready?" Aunt Edith asked. They must have given their assent because a high keening scream could be heard from the area around my front window. I jumped and clutched Peter in the darkness, and then the drum started. Thump, thump, thump. Carlene! Carlene! Aunt Edith intoned. Her voice sounded scratchy. The cousins were dancing, and I could see them swaying in the darkness, their white dresses offset by the flashlight that was shining through the transparent material. It was really an eerie sight. Ready as planned? Peter whispered. I removed the white sheet from the duffel bag and tied it between two willow trees. Peter trained the flashlight on the sheet while I stood between them, creating a distorted image. Peter pressed the play button on the radio, and the maniacal laugh that we had refined during the day came over the radio's speakerphones with a definite roar. The squeaking door and the footsteps we had recorded from a Halloween video was used for added effects. All drum knocking and dancing stopped. "Why do you want Carlene?" came my distorted voice over the recording. I moved my hand so that my silhouette could look eerie. I, Aunt Edith stammered. "No," Peter whispered. I moved behind the sheet, and the thick blackness enveloped me except for the white skull of my head costume. I saw Peter heading toward the dancing girls in the faint light, and I headed toward Aunt Edith. This time I was laughing a maniacal laugh all on my own. "Why, Duppy, Duppy!" The girls ran down the hill, leaving their equipment behind. I heard thud, thud as if someone had fallen, and then a humph. I hoped it wasn't Peter that had fallen in his enthusiasm. Aunt Edith seemed frozen. "Do you know me?" asked the voice over the recording. I advanced toward Aunt Edith. "Aye, Lord help me, Jesus!" she screamed and then took off down the hill. I was right behind her, running for all I was worth while she screamed. I screamed behind her, and when we reached the bottom of the hill, I shouted, "And don't come back," in my best witch screech. Peter was sitting at the side of the banking on a stone. His face was alight with laughter, and he was trying to get up. I breathed hard. The run was exhilarating but tiring. We walked back up the hill in the night. White cloths, flashlights, and a drum could be seen abandoned at the side of the road. "Should I leave those there or carry to them in the morning?" I asked Peter, pointing to the evidence of my aunt's scaring attempts. "Leave them," Peter mumbled. "They will collect it in the morning." In the weeks to come, I learned that Aunt Edith was laid up in bed with heart problems. She was so traumatized that they had to carry her to the hospital on a stretcher. She kept mumbling about skulls with bodies running in the night. The dancing girls, Jigs and Mitzi, had some deep cuts on their bodies. The district attributed this to the duppies that roamed in the night, hurting innocent children. Marcus became really dumb. He jumps at the slightest sound, and when he sees me, his eyes roll over in his head. The doctor said that the shock would wear off. Katrina never returned to the house, no matter how many invitations I offered or how many new clothes I told her she just had to try. One morning, as I sat on my veranda watching the sunrise, my Aunt Mavis came up the hill, her wrinkled face glistening with sweat. "Howdy, girl?" "Morning, Aunt Mavis." "You sleep well?" "Yes, ma'am." "The whole family concerned about you. Them send me to tell you sorry about the house and land business. If you ever want help, don't hesitate to call with your own flesh and blood and we take care of our own." "Yes, Aunt Mavis." "Just don't call in the night. Nobody in their right mind would come up here in the night. You must be a real brave girl." I nodded my head as she tramped down the hill. She stopped and looked at me in admiration. I just waved and smiled. It was going to be peaceful around here for the next couple of years. If you enjoyed this, like, comment, and subscribe. Check the description box for more stories and find my books on Amazon. See you in the next story.